Hi everyone, it's Lauren and welcome to another episode in my series on Shakespeare. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about how to read Shakespeare, so some tips and tricks to help you feel comfortable with the language. It's no secret that a lot of people feel quite intimidated by Shakespeare because of the old-fashioned language and because of the fact it's written in verse. And one of the big barriers is that Shakespeare wasn't really designed to be read. Shakespeare was designed to be performed. So it does take a little bit of imagination on our part to work out what the actors are doing on stage, whereas in a book you have a lot more direction as to what would be going on with the plot. Tip number one is to find a synopsis of the play and read that before you actually read the play itself. A lot of Shakespeare's language is very poetic and there's a lot of imagery in what he writes, because you've got to imagine that a lot of these plays were performed outside. There was minimal staging and special effects, so what audiences were there for was the poetry, and Shakespeare was able to paint a picture for them with his words. But that does mean that when you're trying to work out what's going on, sometimes characters go off on tangents and talk about something else, and while that may be very beautiful, it might be completely irrelevant to what is actually happening in the plot in very basic terms. So if you are struggling with Shakespeare's language, or you get to a passage which you really don't understand, if you have in the back of your mind a basic outline of the plot, you know that as you're reading it, if you get lost, you'll be able to find your way again quite easily. Tip number two, one of the most important ones, is to find some adaptations of Shakespeare. There are tons of films. You can go and see Shakespeare on stage, you can see TV adaptations, film adaptations. I'm sure there are tons of clips on YouTube. Seeing an actor perform Shakespeare can really do wonders to break down the barriers of a language, because they really understand what Shakespeare's words are trying to say. And I find it especially helps for you to watch an experienced person read Shakespeare, because then your ear gets attuned to the rhythm and cadence of Shakespeare, which is very similar. He tends to write in iambic pentameter, and once you get used to that rhythm of language, it makes it a lot easier for you to hear that in your head when you're reading it alone. Not to mention the fact that Shakespeare's themes are absolutely universal, of love and loss and revenge, and they are fantastic to watch. So if you are struggling with reading it, then watching an adaptation can really help bring those themes out. A fantastic online resource is the No Fear Shakespeare project. So all of Shakespeare's plays are in the public domain and can be found online. If you type in No Fear Shakespeare, you will find a website which has every single one of his plays. On one side of the screen you have the original text, and on the other side you have a modern day translation. And I find this especially helpful when there are sections of Shakespeare which are prose, which are discussions between people, because on this side of the screen you just end up with all of the dick jokes which you would not get on a first read, because that colloquialism, that banter, is something that we've lost in translation. Interestingly, I find it actually a lot easier to understand Shakespeare when he's doing this high imagery kind of poetic parts of his soliloquies than when it is just the everyday banter between the servants, for example, and No Fear Shakespeare is very helpful with that. There is also a ton of analysis of Shakespeare online. If you want to get really deep into the language and what Shakespeare really means, then you can just type in a specific soliloquy and you'll get loads of responses come up. And finally, I have some examples for you, so I'm going to help you with this reading experience. This is my copy of Romeo and Juliet, and you can see that most of it is written in verse. Iambic pentameter is what Shakespeare uses mostly, and that means that they are 10-syllable lines. However, that is just the way that it's written on the page to keep it in the rhythm of the verse. If you have a sentence that is longer than 10 syllables, then it will get to a certain point and then the sentence would continue on another page. But that doesn't mean that's how you would read it, or how an actor on stage would actually say the line. So, for example, here is Juliet. You would not read this phrase like this. What's in a name, that which we call a rose? By any other word with smell as sweet. So Romeo would, were he not Romeo called, retain that dear perfection which he owes. No. Make sure when you're reading it that you're paying attention to the grammar, to the punctuation, and you're reading the sentences off the line and you're not thrown by the indents here. As I've already said, another thing that can throw you off your reading experience is the excessive almost use of imagery. So I have another example here from Romeo. But soft, what light through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon, who is already sick and pale with grief that thou, her maid, art far more fair than she. So Romeo is just going off on a tangent here, because Juliet has just come to the window and he's describing her beauty. It's describing the effect that she's having on him. Shakespeare is using poetry to convey Romeo's emotions to you, but you don't really need to understand this about the sun and the moon. I mean, it is interesting, but that's not the point. The real point is this: but soft. Well, hey, hang on one moment. What's going on over there? A light has just come through that window over there, and it is the east. It's like the dawn, and Juliet is the sun rising and bringing that light to the rest of the world. Later on, he says, "It is my lady, oh, it is my love. Oh, that she knew she were. She speaks, yet she says nothing. What of that? Her eye discourses. I will answer it. I am too bold. 'Tis not to me she speaks." So through Romeo's words, we're actually getting what Juliet is doing. There aren't any stage directions here, but he is talking to her. He's wishing that she knew that he was there, and he sees that she's talking to herself, looking around the garden. He thinks she can see him. He goes to wave to her. Oh, no, 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 no. So it just takes a slightly more closer look at the text to not only get what Romeo is saying, but also to give you a vision of what is happening on stage as well. Another example that I really like of the text really communicating what an actor would be doing on stage is this soliloquy from Macbeth. So this is just before Macbeth is about to go and kill Duncan, and he's having a vision. "Is this a dagger which I see before me, the handle toward my hand? Come, let me clutch thee. I have thee not, and yet I see thee still. Art thou not, fatal vision, sensible to feeling as to sight, or art thou but a dagger of the mind, a false creation proceeding from the heat-oppressed brain?" So not only do we have that Macbeth is seeing a dagger in front of him, but he's trying to grab it and realising that he can't. Art thou not sensible to feeling as to sight? Like, I can see you, why can't I feel you? I see thee yet, in form as palpable as this which now I draw. Thou marshals me the way that I was going, and such an instrument I was to use. So again, I see you there as palpable as this which now I draw, this dagger which I have with me, which I'm drawing from my belt. To me, this dagger I see is as real as the one that I'm holding here, which the audience can see. And you are showing, thou marshals me the way, you are showing me the way that I need to go to commit murder. So it's always worth bearing in mind that it's a person delivering a speech to the audience. If you try and read it as you would read a normal book, then you're only going to get half the story. So I hope that that was helpful if Shakespeare is something that you are a little bit nervous about. I know the language can be difficult, the thous, the thys, the farts, but it really is quite simple. The English follows exactly the same grammar as we have now. It's just an older form of you. These are things that you can look up quite easily, and once you understand them, it really is just like reading plain English, and you won't even notice that they're in the text. So let me know how you feel about Shakespeare in the comments below. Are you a complete novice who is a little bit nervous about getting stuck in? Or are you a Shakespeare aficionado? Do you have any more tips of your own that you can share with everybody else? I will be very happy to answer any more questions and take suggestions if there's anything else on Shakespeare you'd like to learn, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!